Thank you. Chairman Khuri, trustees, Mr. Provost, deans, faculty, staff, students, alumni, and honored guests. Good afternoon and welcome to AUB. My name is Fadlo R, and it is my pleasure and privilege to start my service as the 16th president of this most vital and vibrant institution of higher learning. I wanted to talk to you today about developing and nurturing a culture that allows for the pursuit of excellence without the constraints of fear of failure, a culture of high risk, high reward scholarship and education, where well-intentioned mistakes are informative and treated with guidance, understanding, and affirmation. The award-winning novel, Let the Great World Spin, by Colum McCann, tells the tales of several citizens of New York City simultaneously from various perspectives. It includes the real-life story of the tightrope artist Philippe Petit on 7 August 1974, a death-defying and scarcely believable journey between the ultimately tragic two Twin Towers. He violated at least a dozen well-considered and well-intentioned safety laws, but they were all dropped in exchange for service to the children of New York in Central Park a few weeks later. Of course, the book itself has other far more somber tones and a deeply rooted on solid ground antithesis to Petit's soaring act. And yet every character is a study unfinished, a study in insight, a study in hope. As one of them says, good days, they come around the oddest corners. McCann's book won virtually every major prize except for the Pulitzer. It's worth noting that his view from the ground is every bit as gripping as that from the air. Petit's career took off as he became a master of many previously unmastered fields, and he moved to New York, where he still lives. As a boy of not quite 11, living in Lebanon in an AUB that seemed not far removed from idyllic, this is 1974 we're talking about, I was not sure what to make of this high-wire act. Why had Petit done what he did? What did he hope to accomplish? Was he mad or was he brave? Or both? In 1986, while I was at Columbia, I saw him take his by now universally famous high-wire act to the Lincoln Center for the reopening of the Statue of Liberty. I still could not be sure whether he was madman or maestro. In 1982, I had a similar experience in a scientific vein. The very first class I signed up at Yale on transferring for AUB for was Introduction to Genetics, taught by a slight, quiet, and eminently approachable man named Sidney Altman. Dr. Altman, it emerged, was once something of a pariah in the scientific community, everywhere but at Yale. His magnum opus, or his crime, depending on one's point of view, was that he discovered that the RNA component of the ribonuclease P protein complex, this is for Dr. Zuckerby, had catalytic functions previously considered inconceivable. Unfortunately for Dr. Altman, it was unverifiable by others at the time. He lost his grants and his teaching load increased. But the gracious Dr. Altman was always gracefully received at Yale, despite his treatment in the broader scientific community. This course of events continued until something positively miraculous happened. Like the aerial artist Philippe Petit, Altman was a scientific high-wire act of the highest order, and his work was subsequently confirmed in the early 1980s by a Japanese group. All of a sudden, Sid the Pariah, our professor, became a tenured professor at Yale, chair of the biology department and dean of Yale College. Before the decade was over, the reluctant professor had won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. More curiosity, more out-of-the-box behavior. Another figure, once considered mad, or at least crooked, was now a celebrated hero. So what are the things that Philippe Petit and Sidney Altman had in common? Many in Lebanon would like to claim that that link was fluency in the French language, but I don't think that could be it. Good parenting, Clear in Altman's case, as he speaks about learning the value of the work ethic from his immigrant parents, but not so much in Petit's. He was expelled from as many as 5 schools growing up. At any rate, many of us have the fortune to have been parented very well, and we don't climb across the top of tall buildings, nor do we shatter existing scientific paradigms. There was something innate in each of them, certainly, but there's also something about the societies where their greatest gifts were celebrated and not denigrated, and where their greatest accomplishments were achieved. Let's look a little more closely. I started by telling you that Philippe Petit was not arrested, nor was he thrown in jail. Unlike his adolescence in France and New York, Petit was celebrated, and instead, his term was commuted to service to children. He, in fact, decided to move to New York City to live for the rest of his life, where his feats are memorialized now in movies and novellas, as well as in the wonderful book that I cited. Sidney Altman was treated as a revered and respected member of the Yale community throughout his ordeal. He was not a pariah at Yale. He was happy and open, and when the floodgates broke open and his shocking impudence in challenging scientific convention was proven correct, he had nary a detractor across Yale's gleaming towers. Yes, they both soared above us mortals because they were indeed brilliant and had much of the stuff of genius, but also because the greater community rallied around them in their moments of greatness rather than judge them for their presumed folly. In late 1999, as my first major scientific progress at MD Anderson continued to gain pace, it showed that our data were increasingly and irreversibly refuting our original scientific hypothesis. A major developmental gene and its protein product that were important mediators of cellular maturation and homeostasis, biological equilibrium, were demonstrated to be converted during the carcinogenic process to effectors of cancer progression. As I started to blame my wife, who'd gotten me interested in that gene in the first place because she worked on it before me, we started to look at the data. The more data we gathered, the more certain we were. Of course, our first instinct was we had to be wrong. But on a smaller scale, the support that I had from my colleagues and mentors meant that I was willing to accept this alternate hypothesis. The absence of finger pointing or a culture of blame made it much easier for me on a much smaller scale, just as it previously had for Altman and Petit. So what does that have to do with you or with the challenges we face today at AUB and in the broader region? How can an aerial trapeze artist, a geneticist, and the cultures that enabled and celebrated unconventional genius apply to AUB, a great university faced with a paralyzed officialdom amidst a region torn asunder by all-consuming strife, one absent any clear moral compass? What could an aerial artist possibly have to do with the price of bread in Beirut or solutions to permanently remove garbage from the streets? In the midst of all of this, and for all of us at AUB, I believe the answer is relatively straightforward. Both Petit and Altman were fortunate in that they had many role models in their lives and in their careers. And that is the topic today. It's creating a society of role models. Both cite their many influences, and they do so repeatedly. They remark on the influence of others and their ability to think freely and clearly and to experiment boldly in an uninhibited fashion. These are exactly the qualities our students are looking for from us as a society of scholars, as faculty, staff, alumni, and trustees. They're looking for role models. They are looking for risk takers without judgment. They are looking to us to learn how to fly without a safety net. After all, this is where they will learn to spread their own wings, hopefully without fear of reprisal or of corrugating judgment, as we did when we were ourselves students both here and elsewhere. Now, in reading and researching the book, Let the Great World Spin, I was curious about the title. Something in it caught my memory. It had a certain ring to it, and the phrase had a haunting familiarity. I decided to look up the origin of the title, and then it all came back to me. The line is from one of Alfred Lord Tennyson's more masterful but less widely known works, Locksley Hall. Not in vain the distance beacons, forward, forward, let us range. Let the great world spin forever down the ringing grooves of change. This powerful poem, written in 1935 by a young Tennyson, still mourning the loss of his closest friend and companion from his college years at Cambridge, Arthur Hallam, traces the Oriental soldier's journey to self-realization. Here at last, where nature sickens nothing. Ah, for some retreat, deep in yonder shining Orient, where my life began to beat. I began to ask myself, why a soldier from the Orient? An Arab, one of us? Tennyson's son, I soon discovered, stated that the poem itself was inspired by al-Mu'allaqat, the unforgettable pre-Islamic poetry highlighted by the matchless poet Prince Imru al-Qais, whose songs of loss and love had rekindled my own love of poetry and inspired me to write lyrics and form my band on returning from the US in 1977. Ironically, that band debuted here in Assembly Hall. Imru al-Qais created a poetic genre all his own. He too learned how to fly without a net, but the circumstances were different. That net was torn from him by the murder of his father and the loss of their land by the rival clan Banu Asad. In his case, genius emerged as a result of exigency. In all of our views, I believe, the far less preferable path. قفا نبكي من ذكرى حبيب ومنزلي بسقط اللوى بين الدخول فحوملي. Of course, as my friend and longtime counselor, Dr. Makhlouf Haddadin, Dean of Students, Scientists, Poets, and Free Spirits alike at AUB informs me, some Orientalists consider Imru al-Qais as the greatest of all Arab poets. I wondered if Alfred Lord Tennyson was referring in Locksley Hall to Imru al-Qais. Listen to the lines. بكى صاحبي لما رأى الدرب دونه وأيقن أن لاحقين بقيصر فقلت له لا تبكي عينك إنما نحاول ملكا أو نموت فنعذر. This is in reference to Imru al-Qais addressing his lamenting companion on the road to the present Julan Heights. Huran is mentioned, trying to regain his kingdom by soliciting the help of the Byzantine emperor. My sisters and brothers, in the course of the upcoming year, working with our magnificent students, who very nicely formed an honor line on the way in, who have come here from more than 75 different countries in order to learn how to fly without a safety net, I ask you to consider the two paths possible to this form of counterculture, convention-defying genius: mentorship and support or exigency. A culture of countenance and support versus circumstances of extremism and a dreadful plight. I know that all of you will devote all of your remarkable energies to harness the former and counter the latter, because I genuinely believe that in this oasis of collaboration, of collegiality, and of creativity lay the kernels of the next great geneticist, the next great poet, historian, architect, or high-wire artist, or engineer, nutritionist, physician, or business leader. And all they need is to be encouraged to learn to fly without a safety net, because we will catch them. You, in fact, will catch them. After all, was that not the purpose of the founder of AUB, Daniel Bliss, when he sought, like his successors, that the sons and the daughters of the Orient would have life and have it more abundantly? I don't believe it was social mobility alone that they thought of when defining this most memorable phrases, but rather intellectual and creative mobility. The university is here to create business and opportunity, but it's more than anything here to create knowledge and purpose and move us towards a just society. That's what our students crave. And it's that very same mobility that comes with intellectual abundance that most of our students seek. That's what, in the end, our mission is, to help to develop today and tomorrow's Petits and Altmans, that they may contribute to a society of tolerance and progressive thought. In order to do that, we face a very tall order in these circumstances. We must, in fact, embody those ideals ourselves without excuse and without pause. We have to embolden our youth to provide tomorrow's solutions today in a society, in a country, in a world that is crying out for those solutions urgently. We must do it urgently but peacefully. So go forth and reach someone, a student, a colleague, a friend, and become their safety net while they learn how to fly at AUB. Do it with tolerance and patience, and yes, without fear, as we're all privileged to live in an environment where the most unconventional and seemingly illogical thought can flourish and change the way we think, and indeed change the way we do business and teach today. As you do so, pause to reflect upon how fortunate we are here in the Academy. We have to help create transformative opportunities for our students. If those are undergraduate students, if those are faculty, staff, alumni, they are all our students. We can never forget our charge is to create a society where not only the people within these hallowed halls, but I truly believe in AUB's 150th anniversary, all citizens of the world may have life and have it more abundantly. Thank you for your patience, and now go forth and teach someone how to fly without a safety net. I believe we have the alma mater now.